Mortal Online 2, a first-person sandbox MMORPG, began its early access release in late 2021, with a full release in January of this year, with a focus on open-world full-loot PvP, fighting over land and control in the endless quest to rule its land of Nave. Today we take a dive into its harsh lands to uncover what it has to offer MMO fans following its release, and what kind of experience you'll be in for when jumping into the self-claimed most immersive MMORPG experience. My name's Mitch Mannix, and this is my look into Mortal Online 2 in 2022. When first booting up the game, we are greeted with a lovely shot of an orc staring wistfully off into the distance to welcome us, before jumping straight into the game's character creator, where Mortal Online 2 sports a fair amount of options to craft your chosen hero out of a number of races available, such as Halloween Mike Tyson and Walmart Sasquatch, with even more options to mix and match the heritage of your character for further customization. The creator in Mortal, just like a number of things in the game, has far more depth and weight to it than some may initially realise, and we'll talk a little more around this a little later in the video. But we need a hero for this journey, and since this is a full loot PvP experience, of course we'll need to call upon the skills of Weslan the Displeased, a man pre-configured with the most important post-gank scowl of disappointment. With our hero confirmed, it's time to jump straight into the game, with our first stop being the game's tutorial zone named Haven. Haven being an instant, smaller sized island used to allow the players to get a grasp of the basics before being thrown into the lions of the mainland. And upon arriving, I can't help but notice how awkward and lifeless the opening settlement feels. The mostly completely static NPCs staring back at me, with a lack of any background ambience, gives me the uncomfortable and somewhat eerie feeling of turning up to a family barbecue with an unnoticed exposed testicle. We quickly set to work through the game's quite well put together opening tutorials, taking us through some of the key mechanics such as how to gather and craft, as well as its survival elements, including how to hunt and keep myself alive. While wandering to each nightclub-tinged tutorial area, what's clear early on is the claim of being an immersive experience can already be seen within the game's opening hours. Wood, for example, can be gathered with practically anything swingable, and hunting and butchering the local wildlife to cook up my first meal felt much more interactive and satisfying than with most other MMOs, with even a nice dose of food poisoning following the cooking tutorial to further illustrate my rookie beginnings. But Westland here yearned for adventure, so we set out to explore some of the dungeons and settlements provided in the tutorial island, for a real look at the game's combat. Taking on foes in Mortal Online 2 will be familiar to anyone who has played titles such as Kingdom Come Deliverance, the game's first-person perspective using directional options for swings, blocks, stabs and overheads. This coupled nicely with the game's parry system, rewarding quick reflexes when successfully blocking at the last moment, for a chance to counter with a fast damaging strike. Further consideration is needed during engagements around positioning, as during combat it's possible to get caught on the walls and doors while winding up for a swing, and players can even bonk enemies with the hilt of their weapon if getting too close during a fight. For me at least, the combat took a bit of getting used to, but again led to some highly satisfying moments that would have felt like merely going through the motions in most other MMOs due to its challenging nature. Exploring Haven's bandit-infested regions felt great, slowly creeping through to not get overwhelmed, and at one point was even treated to a synchronized performance by a couple of lovely bandit ladies, unfortunately ripping me right back out of the immersion built by all the enjoyable exploration. Weslan needed to prepare himself for the challenges that lay ahead, so looked to get a head start on his skills before heading out, grabbing a spellbook and getting a chance to try out some of the game's magic abilities, such as a light heal and a water attack so pathetic I would have done more damage to the zombie by dribbling on him. Progression in Mortal Online 2 is of course tied to obtaining powerful gear, but also to the player's clade and skill levels, the former being a set of selectable passive buffs unlocked once enough experience has been gained by taking down the game's hostile NPCs, and the skill system being an eye-wateringly in-depth set of obtainable skills, gained by in-game actions as well as using skill books attached to your character to increase the chosen skill passively during play, with a number of clades obtained, and even seemingly a terrifying war cry in his arsenal. Good morrow, sir. Where can I find some tea? Weslan's time within the safety of the tutorial island drew to a close, as we set our sights on what awaited us across the sea, within the cutthroat rolling hills of the mainland. And oh boy, did I have quite the experience waiting for me. Well, that was anticlimactic. Loading into my first town within the mainland, a whole host of players littered the area going about their business and brawling in the streets. It feels like home already. It was cool to get not only a look at the game's mounts, but also the variety of gear obtainable in the game while watching some of the duels going on in the streets. Oh look, that guy's spinning around. The disrespect to style on someone like that. Surely it's not a serious technique when fighting, I thought. Now realized into the world proper, it was time for some initial exploration, making my way out of the town to take on some more challenging NPCs, inhabiting a nearby ruin, while getting a reminder of not only Mortal Online 2's somewhat janky elements, but also the game's durability system.
Oh god.
I have nothing left, sir, so I will have to resort to Pikachu. Grabbing a weapon upgrade, I was yearning for some PvP action, so wandered all the way across the land, getting a look at a number of the game's static player housing, that although adding some great features, can lead to being pulled out of the immersion once again, due to some rather unique naming choices. Good sir, I task upon you a quest of most import. You must seek out the noble knights of the Fuck Shack, traverse the land, assemble your armies, and only then will you be ready to take on the brutal warriors of Space Jam DVD.
Hello? Who is it?
And you too could do your part in taking on the warriors of Space Jam DVD by dropping a like on the video if you enjoy it and letting me know your thoughts down in the comments.
Hey, Peter. It
really helps to keep the content coming. Wesland journeyed all the way to the lawless town of Kranesh, while deciding to punctuate his arrival by unintentionally kiting a number of bandits that had been hounding him like cosplaying autograph hunters for what felt like miles, to the confusion of the players inhabiting the town.
Yo, what is going on?
It's in Kranesh that I managed to persuade a couple of the game's veteran players, who apparently hang out exclusively in this town, to give me a taste of the player versus player combat.
Right, which one of you wants to smash a noob's head in then?
Which felt exciting even at a significant disadvantage, while at the same time a bit clunky, but definitely something that would need a significant amount of practice to get a mastery of, which as far as I'm concerned is a good thing considering its focus in this MMO. After a number of duels, and a kindly donated new set of armor, we made our way back across the land with instructions to level up my Clade experience. And while on the way being a total loot rat, picking up even more armor dropped by a player, and getting an instant dose of karma by way of a pack of wolves only a few minutes later. Now back at my starting town of Fabinum, now gearless, I spent the few coins I had to gear myself back up, and headed into the newly added sewers beneath the town, as advised by my dueling buddies to get some levels. Now any veterans of Mortal Online 2 watching this will be able to predict just how that went, as after a number of attempts to kill some mobs and get some gear, spent most of the time getting ganked by massive groups of heavily armoured players or individual rat players that would wait until I was mid-fight and come up and cave my head in. This is a truly dog-eat-dog environment, so to beat them, I would have to join them. So ratted around a final time, coming across a post-fight treasure trove of gear. Quickly scurrying it away, I saw the owners barreling towards me, and quickly bolted away from them. I was in a deep part of the sewers, so would need to think on my feet to get away. So in a quick decision slipped into a dark corner of the sewer caverns, and waited for my criminal status to drop off. As well, these were stolen goods, all within reaching range of potential death, as well as what I imagined to be extremely enraged owners of my newly acquired inventory walking right past me. Uh-oh. Oh god, he's coming around. Oh my god, I won't see me. Yes! Get in! Yes! Oh god, I still need to get out. I had done it. I returned to the town and put on some of my new gear. And even though I didn't have the stats, felt a small sense of accomplishment from my scumbaggery. But also a feeling that everyone around me somehow knew I was up to no good. How did they know? The next few hours were spent mostly exploring to a point, then returning after being murdered to head out once again, cursing under my breath until I could no longer afford my gear, and would need to grind out materials to get set up again. Safe to say that the solo life in Mortal Online 2 is like trying to build a sandcastle during the D-Day landings. Quite the traumatizing experience. So look to leveling up my skills to expand my crafting capabilities, and slowly creep towards progress, I tamed a horse and got a chance to explore some of the game's grander environments that, although impressive in scale, again felt barren and lifeless, unfortunately a far cry from the immersion the game prides itself on. Where Mortal Online 2 does hit the mark is with its insanely in-depth crafting and build customization options. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, creating a character is not purely aesthetic, but also tied to your stats, and ultimately the builds you'll be able to reach for once in the game. Selecting height and weight, for example, and even age, having its own impact on player stats. Mortal Online also provides immersion through its challenges and its ability to make even small tasks feel rewarding, gathering materials or snagging even small upgrades in the face of the game's hostilities. Sneaking into camps and dungeons knowing that any moment you could be murdered and lose it all is a terrifying and brilliantly intense experience. Not only this, but the game being a sandbox also adds greatly to the immersion. Moments like pulling off the crappiest heist in history in the sewer, and my adventure travelling across the land to duel with the medieval equivalent of Jay and Silent Bob felt like adventures that you simply cannot craft when playing more linear-focused MMORPGs. But the sandbox focus, as well as its claim of ultimate immersion, unfortunately does come with its fair share of issues. As someone with experience in a wide range of full-loot PvP games such as Rust, Tarkov, Conan Exiles, and Ark, taking a beating and clawing my way back up is not unfamiliar to me to say the least. However, in Mortal Online 2, it feels like the groups of marauding, well-geared players murdering clearly new players are doing so not only just for the compensation for their unfortunately sized manhood, but also due to them not feeling like there's much more else to do. Taking a stroll, fucking someone's day up in a game where everything takes so much time to progress, and with no wipes or clean slates, feels like most new players will give up before they've even spent more than a few hours in the mainland of the game. Not only this, but for a now full release of what they're calling the most immersive MMORPG, there is plenty to pull you out of it. Enemy NPCs clipping through the terrain, floating in mid-air, or being able to attack while completely invisible. Players spinning around like Ren-fair ballerinas to cheese the combat mechanics, the unfinished feeling towns and settlements that don't exactly give you a feeling of bustling medieval towns, unless you of course partake in some of the local intellectual conversation.
I bet you, hey, watch that, I bet you she takes big shits. Huge.
Oh, because...
Mortal Online 2 overall feels like an attempt at something original, which is nice to see, and has some really immersive, satisfying experiences on offer. But unless you're planning to go in with a group, or quickly establish yourself within a grounded guild, will more than likely lead to a rather traumatic experience, slowly going insane trying to progress through a greatly time-consuming progression system, at the same time endlessly dealing with some of the game's more toxic and bored player base looking to make your time with the game as short as possible. I can imagine that getting into a big guild and grinding your way to the more advanced magic and combat options could feel great once you've got that network and that foothold. But for me at least, overcoming the game's glitchy elements, incredibly time-consuming progression system, and empty, soulless feeling environments makes me wonder why I would bother when there are other games that do full loot PvP so much better. Mortal Online 2 doesn't even feel like a finished game to me. The developers are even planning on charging a subscription for the game coming soon, which frankly is a slap in the face for such an unpolished feeling product. If you're a fan of full loot PvP offerings, Mortal Online 2 with its focus on immersion and RPG components does have some fairly unique and adventure fueling elements, and I can see why it does appeal to some, especially those crafters out there seeking a deep system to get stuck into. But the cost of entry being unenjoyable at best, and frequently infuriating for a number of reasons, coupled with the half-baked feeling open world, makes me feel like the truly immersive RPG sandbox experience may still be some time away. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played or are looking to jump into Mortal Online 2? As always, I'm keen to get your thoughts down in the comments. I'd like to give a big shout out to the channel members who help in supporting the channel and keeping the content coming. If anyone's interested in joining as a channel member for all sorts of perks including exclusive videos, the info is down in the description. Thanks again for anyone making it this far, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Jesus, calm down!
Oh dear lord, what have I done?